In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the creation of a C# Hello World application. And we're going to do this using a console application because the console application allows us to create a very, very simple application with no concern for what the user interface looks like. It allows us to get to the actual code and what C# is trying to do. And so we'll back up and explain the boilerplate that's created for you whenever you go to create one of these console applications so that you can understand the different parts and how it works. We're going to be using console applications throughout the remainder of the C# series of videos, so it's important for us to kind of explain some of the basics as we get started. So to get started, what I'm going to do is create a new C# console application by selecting File, New, Project from the toolbar. The New Project dialog opens. I'm going to select C# Projects, and then I'm going to scroll down till I see the console application icon. And what we'll do here, and I'm going to do a little housework here, is type in the name of my application is 2101, and the location will be at D:/LVS. You'll notice that the project will be created at D:/LVS/2101. That's exactly where I want it, so I'm going to select OK. And after just a few moments, VisualStudio.net creates the framework for a console application. You'll notice that it creates a boilerplate for us as it opens up the default class1.cs file for us in our project. And we can, and we will, talk about this boilerplate that it sets up for us. But let's just go straight into coding. And we're going to create our first application, our Hello World application, by typing console.writeLine Hello World. And don't forget that the end of line in a C# statement needs a semicolon. That has come back and bit me a number of times. So that's the first lesson that you'll learn today. So what we'll do first is save our application by clicking on Save Class 1. Alternatively, I could save all or select Save from the File menu. The next thing that I need to do is actually build my application. To do that, I'm going to select Build menu, and I can select Build Solution. I can also select Control, Shift, and B as a keyboard shortcut, but for right now we'll just select it from the menu. And after just a few moments it will build successfully our application. Now we can run it for the first time. What we'll do is first demonstrate how to run the application using the Start button on the menu. But you'll notice that Visual Studio ran and unloaded the console application very quickly. So this isn't a very effective way to test our console applications. Instead, what I suggest we do is that we actually start up our own console application, navigate to the appropriate directory that contains our files, and then run the debug version that we created of our executable. I've repositioned the window so that you can see my Windows desktop a little bit better. I'm going to, in Windows XP, select the Start button and then select the Run option. And when I do that, the Run dialog box opens. You'll need to type in the word Command and then select OK. This will open up the Command window, which resembles the old DOS window for navigating and starting applications. So what we're going to do is navigate to the D drive. We're going to go to LVS 2101, bin, and debug. And we're going to, as you can see right now, we have two files here. The most important of the two is the 2101.exe. So let's go ahead and run that by simply typing in 2101 to see if our application works. I'll push the Enter key, and notice it says Hello World. So that's great. We've just tested our first console application. What I'm going to do is minimize this window and go back to the code window so that we can talk about the boilerplate that was created for us automatically when we create a console application. The first thing that I want to point out is this using statement here at the top. This includes the system namespace into our application. By default, all console applications and many of the applications that you create, such as ASP.NET applications and WinForm applications, will contain the system namespace. It is the basic library of classes, of structures, of interfaces, of enumerations, and many more things that allow you to do anything from array manipulation to application versioning. It's essential as we go to build our applications because it is the base class from which everything else will come. The next important feature is the namespace statement. We'll talk about namespaces a little bit later as we go to manage the projects that we create, but you'll notice that our namespace is by default the same name as the project that we created, with one quick exception. In this case, since we named our project a number, it places an underscore in front of the number because they've enforced a rule that says basically that namespaces cannot begin with a number. Now we see a series of comments both here and both here. And what these allow you to do are make comments in your class. Then as you use Visual Studio.NET, there's a utility that we'll go over a little bit later in the C# series that allows you to create HTML documentation from all these XML comments that you have within your code. So this is great if you want to provide documentation for other coders or just to remind yourself. It's a great way of self-documenting within the code. The next feature of the boilerplate is the class statement. We'll go into what classes are a little bit later, but basically in C# and all of .NET, all executable code has to be within the context of a class. By default, Visual Studio.NET will create a class for you called Class 1, but we can change that name to anything that we want it to be. The last feature of the boilerplate that I want to point out is this statement, the static void main. And you'll notice that at the very end of it, it has something that's called string args. And what this is basically saying is that it's going to allow an array of strings to be passed in, and we'll reference it within our application as the variable name args. And so let me explain what this means. First of all, as we created our application, Visual Studio.NET, or rather .NET framework, needed to know where to start the application. And so by default, console applications must have this static void main as their entry point into the application. It then knows that this is the first line of code that it needs to run because it's within our static void main. Every console application has to have this, but it can be overridden. So in this case, what we've allowed the application to do is pass in arguments to our application, which we haven't taken advantage of yet, but we will in just a moment. But we can also override this to allow us to pass in just an integer or pass in nothing at all. We'll come into the concept of overriding methods in a future video. But for right now, what we're going to do is show the use of these args that we can pass into our application by modifying our little console write line statement to say hello plus args. So whatever gets passed into the application will be output by our application. So let's go ahead and save this, and it'll be easier to show you than explain it to you at this point. So it built correctly. And now what we'll do is we'll bring up our console window once again, and we'll type in 2101, but we'll also type in Scott, and we'll hit enter. And you'll see our application now says, hello, Scott. So we passed in the word Scott, and as a result of our use of the args, and this means the first element that's passed in, and we could have passed in a whole string. We could have passed in Scott and Steve and Mike and Jim, but we took the very first argument, which in this case was the only one that was passed in, and output it to the console window. So we hope that this video was helpful to you, give you a little foundation to help you learn C# a little bit better. Building console applications is what we'll do as we go through the next several videos on the use of variables, of loops, and all the programming constructs that you have in a typical programming language. So we hope you enjoyed this video.